Good morning, everybody. It's Monday morning, and I wanted to devote this video session to a little roundup of what we have achieved in terms of our television news outputs, and also to give you guidance and a briefing for our forthcoming radio program Newsday on Wednesday. So I hope that you have managed to append, modify, and polish your news broadcast that we viewed and discussed last Friday, and that the final definitive version is going to be ready or is already ready by now, or is going to be ready this week so that we can put it in our portfolios. I will remind you that we needed a few rejigs and visuals over the menu, and the contribution of a read over pictures from Joanna as her own story, either in the coronavirus sequence or in the rest of the world sequence. And you will also recall that the first section on coronavirus was done as a round robin, that is, after the initial cue from Joanna, the reporters pass the baton over to one another until the last one hands over back to Joanna in the studio, and then Joanna moves over to the rest of the world, and then we have a ping pong to and fro from the reporters back to Joanna every time. And at the end, we add the roundup of the main headlines, also with a couple of visuals, and also the final SIG tune and visuals of this international news logo that you have chosen. So I'm expecting that this final version will be uploaded on your YouTube channel very soon. And now we will move over to our radio Newsday on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, which is a logical step from our first television effort to our radio news bulletins to a proper NCA radio program. And obviously, a news bulletin, as you recall, is simply a very short, compressed a tablet or capsule of news prepared and written in a way that can be consumed over a very short period of time. That's why the brevity, conciseness is essential, and just capturing the top line and the main points of the story. And we deliver it either through simply copy stories or illustrated stories with either actuality or a voice piece. Now, you produced quite satisfactory radio news bulletins in our first radio news day. Now we're moving over to a more complex format, which is a proper program. Now, there are 9 of you, and I hope that all of you will take part in the radio Newsday on Wednesday. And the first step towards producing News and Current Affairs, or NCA radio program, is to listen to samples and examples of such programs. So I would advise you very strongly to go through several such programs on the BBC, because effectively speaking, the BBC is the only provider of such programs at professional and high quality level. There are a few American radio stations that do similar products, like WGBH Boston, but they use different formats, and it's more magazine-y, more relaxed, quite different. So it's better to stick with the BBC classical formats at the moment. And the best programs to listen to for the sake of international journalism students is BBC World Service News Hour. It can be found very easily on the internet by basically typing in BBC World Service News Hour. That'll take you to the latest episodes, and it would be great if you can listen to at least a couple of them. You will notice that they are 53 minutes long. Actually, it's a full hour, 58 minutes. It counts as full hour in radio broadcasting because the 5-minute bulletin had been chopped off at the top. But normally this program, when you listen to it in a linear fashion, at top of the hour, it's either at lunchtime or an evening program, you will have the menu, and followed by news summary, because the menu obviously preempts headlines, so it's not a bulletin but a summary, which is a 5-minute summary, and followed by the program. Now, if you examine the formats on the program, there are two basic formats that they use. One of them is an interview and the other one is a package. There are also other formats, but I think at our stage and level of advancement, we needn't bother too much about them. But just for the sake of, due diligence, apart from a two-way interview, which may be live or pre-recorded, and what is called a radio package or a featurette, other formats that are used in such programs, news and current affairs programs, are, for instance, a donut. A donut is a format in which the presenter or the host turns to a reporter or a correspondent, either in the field or somewhere else in the studio or another studio, and starts a little two-way with them, asking, so what's going on, John, in terms of, for instance, coronavirus in Nottingham? And John says, well, here in Nottingham, things are a little bit tricky. I have got Steve Blunt with me, who coordinates action in care homes. Steve, how have you been coping with the increased number of cases in care homes? And Steve talks to our reporter. So this is called a live donut. There are also some other types of donuts where the donut is not or the jam in the donut is not an interview, but for instance, a package or pre-recorded package. So this is one of the formats. Another one is studio or mixed discussion, where you don't only interview one person, but you take on board two participants in, for instance, a polarized or controversial story that requires 2 points of view rather than just an informed expert's view in one interview. So you can invite two people. Sometimes they invite 3 people, but usually 2, and they discuss a live or in a pre-recorded fashion a story to give 2 sides of the story. Sometimes you can have more, but if you go above 3 people in radio studio, then there is a problem of identifying them because you can't see them, so you have to refer to their names or reintroduce them in the course of discussion several times. So it's technically more complex and requires a lot more sophistication and professionalism. And as we said, the second format, which is used to be highly valued, but because it is time-consuming and quite expensive, it is slowly disappearing from radio, which is a shame, which is a radio package. So I would recommend that you do these 2 formats. You analyze and critically observe these 2 formats: an interview, a radio interview, and a radio package. Now, with the radio interview, if you go back to the first semester, we said that there are different types of interviews. and each of them is quite unique. And in order to conduct a successful interview, 90, if not 95% of the success is the preparation. So when you work on a news and current affairs program with a very limited time, and during the editorial meeting you decide to do a story, for instance, about the production of rubber rings in Chile, what you want to do is to identify possible interviewees. You start chasing them, as we call it, that is bashing phones, sending emails, until you get an agreement or contact, for instance, the CEO of the rubber ring production factory, or somebody who knows a lot about rubber rings and how the Chile started competing against China in the global distribution of rubber rings. And once you've identified, approached, and agreed an interviewee, obviously you conduct research. So it would be absolutely impossible for the presenter who presents about 10, 12 stories on a 1-hour show to brief themselves in detail over complex and sometimes arcane and technical stories. For this reason, we've got producers. What producers do is they chase stories, they research them, they procure an interviewee for the program that can be pre-recorded before the program or done live in the program, and they provide a brief. And the brief gives the basic essence description of the story, the context, refers the presenter and the editor to possible other sources that they can consult, but also presents the interviewee and what they have said during a pre-interview with the producer. And the producer who is preparing the interview for the presenter also prepared suggested questions. So that brief is looked at by the editor, approved, amended, and passed on to the presenter or host, and then can play with it as they wish. They can rejig questions, append them, they consult the producer and discuss the best way of dealing and handling the interview. So this is the way it's done. Now, the way that interviews are conducted, as you will see, differ very much. They may be confrontational, they may be cooperative when you want to bring out as many details to educate and inform the audience. They can be sharing, as we said, they can be confessional, they can be of different types. So there is no one way of approaching interview. Every interview in a way is a unique, but the essence of a successful interview is a great brief and good research from the producer, preparatory work, and cooperation with the editor and the host in preparing the brief and the questions for the interview. The interview in modern times, modern programs usually takes between 2 to 3 minutes in duration. The standard is about 2.5, which implies about 3-4 questions during the interview. And usually before you interview somebody, you brief them if they have no experience of doing interviews for the radio, news and current affairs programs, because some people may have done interviews lasting 10, 15 or half an hour in the past, and they may think that this is the same type of interview, or they may have provided interviews for print, in which case they speak not for broadcast. And as your practice has shown during our interview between Joanna and Andrew Riley on Mali, that requires a lot of preparation on both parts, both the presenter and the interviewee, who needs to provide answers of about 30 seconds of duration on average, but never longer than 40 seconds. If you provide an answer which is longer than 40 seconds in a news and current affairs interview, people will get bored and switch off. They want to see this dynamic exchange going on. That's what makes for a very successful interview, the dynamism, the exchange. If it becomes a monologue, people will switch off. So if somebody speaks at length, it is the job of the presenter to make sure that you stop them at a convenient point after you feel they are speaking for too long and it's getting a little bit boring. So it'll be great if you can listen to BBC World Service News Hour. Also, another program domestically which is worth listening to is PM at 1700 on Radio 4. It used to be much better when it had Eddie Mair as a presenter, who was a supreme interviewer and a great presenter. He's gone over to LBC Talk Radio, I think so, and he's got a show there which is not as good in terms of production values and editorial values as the BBC News and Current Affairs programs. So you may want to listen to Eddie Mair interviewing skills, because he's absolutely supreme in his skills and sensitivity and feel for interviewing. But now we're coming to this second format, the radio package. In order to understand how packages are made, you've already had a very nice introductory practice with your piece to camera and with superimposed visuals. Now, the reason why we don't want to continue in that mode of operating is that the radio package follows a different formula. We don't do a textual read and then put bits and pieces, because that would make it very static, and you may have already seen in your television reports that it doesn't give you the best way of storytelling. You've done very well, and most of your pieces are excellent and very well made. I'm honestly in awe of your progress and your ability to produce television news already. But the radio package is the kind of an animal that is about storytelling, and there are very different ways of storytelling, and the more packages you listen to, the more techniques you will discover that correspondents and reporters use to tell a story. The best way of dealing with it is what we will apply in our second television Newsday, when we will not superimpose visuals over a textual narration, but we will take a kind of a film script formula. That is, I want to tell a story. What pictures can I use to tell the story? You put a sequence of those pictures together, and then you link them up by script. The script links them up, complements the story or explains the pictures, and that's how the news television package is made. In radio, you don't have the pictures, you've got sounds. So you ask the same question. What is the best way to tell the story using those sounds, the sounds of interviewees, the sounds of birds or cars or explosions or sirens or whatever, and then you deploy your writing skills, you link up those sounds and you explain them, you describe them, and you pull the package together. There are very different techniques of using that, and as a first instance, I would like to refer you to the NewsHour program on the 26th of April on Sunday in the evening, which is available online in the NewsHour on the NewsHour website. And there are two interesting packages which differ quite a lot. The first one is by Jane O'Brien from the US on the increase in the sale of guns, and the way she has put that package is a very standard classical way. If you analyze that, she uses clips of sounds which explain the story, take us closer to the story, give us a sense of location, maybe a bit sense of drama, and then interviews. clips of interviews, and she joins them up in a logical storytelling sequence. Some of you may notice that some of the interviews are obviously conducted remotely and on mobile phones. Some have better, some have poorer sound quality. This is because Jane obviously wasn't able to move around too much. And also, for some people who observe and analyze television packages, there is a strong probability that Jane O'Brien did a television package on that subject, and then what we call reversioned it for radio. So the way she tells the story sounds pretty much like she took the pictures from her television package and explained them a little bit more for radio and created the radio version. Now, that is not the case with the second package at about, if I'm not mistaken, around 27th minute of the NewsHour program on the 26th by Mark Lowen from Rome, where Mark Lowen employs a different strategy, which we might say show and tell on radio, when she does a kind of report which we might describe it as live, as if he was in a place, walking around, talking to people, even though he jumps from one location to another, so it travels in time and place. We don't have a sense of this artificial jumps from places and on different days. It's as if he was walking around Rome and talking to different people, and it gives us a sense of him being there, walking, explaining, and he engages with his interviewees. We have a sense as if it were happening live in front of us, and obviously it's pre-recorded, most of it, but done in a kind of as live fashion. So it's a very different way of covering the subject and telling a story. Very interesting. My preferred way is the kind of a reporting as live way of giving a package. Actually, it's more difficult than doing a classical chopped bits of audio and put them together and link them up type of package, which is a standard classical way of pulling a sound material together. This kind of as live reporting requires a lot more experience and sophistication. You may notice that Mark Lowen engages with people on a higher level because he discusses cultural, literary things. He's familiar with books and authors and history. He doesn't boast of it or show off. He just makes it to enhance his package. That's quite a sophisticated way. He shows that he's part of Roman life, which is something expected of a correspondent living in a place and reporting from there. So that's a very good example. If you could listen and analyze as many of those packages as you can, that would be fantastic. Now, how do we want to construct our radio Newsday when we meet on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday? Obviously, we want to start with an editorial meeting, so we will need somebody who will take care of the overall shape of the program. So you need to decide who's going to be the editor of the program, which leaves us with 8 remaining people. And we want to definitely start with a summary. So one person would be dedicated to producing a short summary, maybe 2 or 3 minute summary. If you want to be more ambitious, you can make a full 5 or minute summary with 2 or 3 illustrated bits. Otherwise, it may be a 3-minute summary with a couple of inserts, as we call them, that is pieces of audio, and it can probably be successfully delivered by a single person who can pull the bulletin together under the editorial eye of the editor and produce it and read it. So it will be a kind of a summary producer and newsreader. So we've got two functions now. Then we need the host or the presenter of the whole program. That makes 3 people, and that leaves us with 5 people. So that would be a very poor program if we only had 5 items. So I would expect that both the editor and the presenter will deliver an output of some description. We'll discuss it in a moment. But this leaves us, if we dedicate one person to produce and newsread the summary, with 8 people. So we would expect about 8 items in the program of varying duration between 2 and 3 minutes. So we're looking at on average 2.5 minutes times 8. So it could be a program of about 22 minutes duration plus the summary. So we're looking at about 25 minutes, maybe up to half an hour. That will give a chance to each of you to produce either an interview on a story or a package. I would strongly recommend that you ambitiously try and produce a package. If you produce an interview, it should be a well-researched, briefed, and researched and prepared interview with a good brief, because the interview will not be conducted by you, but by the presenter under your guidance and on the basis of your brief. So if we could achieve the kind of a balance in that program of 4 interviews and maybe 4 packages, that would be fantastic. Obviously, the item that needs to be prepared by the host or the presenter as their own output would be an interview. So we know that one of the interviews will be produced, prepared, and conducted by the presenter or the host, while 3 more would be produced and prepared to be conducted by the presenter by 3 producers. So you will need to chase, write a brief, prepare questions for the presenter, and produce that interview, possibly pre-recorded, hopefully pre-recorded, rather than delivered live in the program as your own outputs. And my recommendation is that the presenter attempts a live interview in the program if that could be lined up. If it's impossible to do a live interview during our attempted broadcast, then it can be pre-recorded. Doesn't matter, because we'll probably string up the program the way we did our television news program. When it comes to the 4 packages, and also any guidance on the interviews, I will be available in the run-up to Wednesday, obviously during the Wednesday session, and also after the session. So if you want to contact me how to go about your packages or briefs for interviews or preparing questions, I'll be available most of the time. So the idea is that we will have the program the same way that you have news and current affairs programs, and the way you dealt with it with the television news program. So we want to have some kind of identity sound called SIG-tune at the top of the program, a menu, maybe with a clip. We don't have visuals in radio, but we have sound illustrations, so a couple of clips. And then we have a summary prepared and read by a newsreader. And then we've got the host introducing or queuing up items. So looking at this program, we'll probably halfway through, around 12 past or 15 past, if it's half an hour, we'll have a couple of headlines or a small or a very short summary of 40 seconds or 45 seconds, read by by the newsreader who read the bulletin, the summary at the top, and then we move over to the remaining 3 or 4 items on the program. So this is more or less the way we want to produce it. Now, how do we go about it on the day? Which we will try to prepare as much material as you can. On Wednesday, I would like you to come up with ideas of stories or packages that you want to do on a particular story, The packages and interviews that you want to do should be somehow tied and related to the stories as they are likely to crop up on the day. That doesn't have to be the developing or breaking story. It may be something that you have read that has been developing in recent days, but it should be very closely related to the main events that are taking place now or in recent days. We can discuss your ideas during the editorial meeting, and then we'll start, after the editorial meeting, we'll start working on those items and try to prepare as much material as possible. Over the course of the following few days, you will record your passages, the packages and interviews, and under the guidance of the editor. I would be very happy if you can show me your work for comment and feedback. And once you have finalized them over the course of the next few days after Wednesday, we can record it as a sequence. And then this will produce a third practical journalism or journalism practice in the newsroom output, which will be the News and Current Affairs radio program. And the fourth and final one will be the second television Newsday on the 6th of May. So I hope that this is helpful, and I also hope that you take time and effort to watch it and listen to it and take cue from it, and in the next day or so listen to those programs, analyze how packages and interviews are made, conducted, and then we meet on Wednesday this week at 1 o'clock and embark on that radio Newsday together. That'll be it from me for the moment, and I'll post this very shortly. Thanks a lot.